for the first one. What is your name and your official title here?
Tommy Jones, Associate Director.
Associate Director. Why did you choose this job?
For me, I chose this job because of being a former student athlete at the University of Michigan. The different challenges and adversities that I faced and some of my teammates faced, the support really wasn't there. And so for me, I always kind of look back on what type of student could I have been at the University of Michigan if I had better support. And so for me, I wanted to fill that gap.
Oh, okay. So, like coming through, well, yeah, actually you kind of answered. Like next one's like, what kind of made you pick like sports management coming through college?
Sports management for me, I knew I wanted to work somewhere in athletics, but wasn't sure where. But I also wanted to make sure that I still had a business background.
Okay.
So for me, once I found sports management, I was like, this is a perfect combination.
A little bit of both.
Mm-hmm.
Good. What on like your everyday job, like what's your favorite part of the job, like just on an average day?
On the average day is definitely interaction with the student athletes that I work with.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us anyways.
Yes. Yes, indeed. It's never boring.
Alright. Now the opposite, what's your least favorite? Like if there's something you could change?
Sometimes it's the adults you work with.
The adults you work with.
Not understanding that the support that we're providing for the student athletes is not to be like an extra benefit, but it's really to, in a lot of ways, level the playing field for the student athlete. I think a lot of times people have the perception that it's so easy to be a student athlete, and to me, it's one of those shows that MTV used to do called Diary, and it takes a look at people's lives that are famous and entertainers, and it shows them behind the scenes that it's not as pretty, it's not as glamorous as you think it is.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times it's the same way with student athletes, that people think it's so easy and they have it made, and it's a full-time job with no days off, no sick days.
True.
So to me, that's what is probably the most frustrating thing when I say some of the adults don't get it.
Yeah.
Is you're dealing with the biases and stereotypes, and I'm like, if you just get to know them, understand what their day is like, you would have a much different perception of student athletes.
Oh yeah, I feel that. What things that did you get your degree from Michigan, or
Yes.
did you go anywhere else?
Yep. So I got my undergrad degree in sports management from University of Michigan, and then my master's degree in counseling from Michigan State. So
Wow.
yeah, that was different.
That was tough.
Great program. And while I was at Michigan State, I also worked with their student athlete support program. It was affectionately known as Mr. Michigan because they knew where my allegiance stood.
They knew what you was about. When you were in college, when you was getting your degree, was like sports management, was that like your set in stone thing?
No, actually, set in stone. I knew I was going to do business, or so I thought.
Yeah.
And University of Michigan has a really great business school, one of the best in the nation. And so when I told everyone I was going to Michigan, I was going to do business, everyone got excited. And I took all the prereq business courses I needed to take. And then I went and met with my business advisor just to kind of do a double check. And she asked me a life-changing question. She was like, what do you want to do? And I looked at her like, business? What do you mean? And she's like, there's finance, there's accounting. Do you want to own your own business? Do you want to go into management? And no one had ever asked me those questions. So I didn't understand there were all these different kind of different fields within business. And so for me, I was basing my decision to study business as my major based on my family members that worked in corporate America. I saw my dad and my uncles, they wore nice suits, we had nice houses, nice cars, they did some business travel, but I didn't know what they did on a daily basis, so I was more attracted to the lifestyle that business provided and not really understanding all these different facets and fields of it. And then when she had that conversation with me, that's when we did some exploring and figuring out what did I want to do. And then that's when I found the sports management.
You saw the outside of the business. That
Yes.
Was going through college when you were getting your degree, was it difficult?
Yes.
Was it difficult for you to
Yes.
to get it?
There were definitely some days I was like, Lord Jesus, are they going to ask me to leave without the degree? Especially my freshman and part of my sophomore year. It was tough because things that I did through high school to be successful as a student, it wasn't yielding me the same results. And so I was struggling academically my freshman and sophomore years, the beginning part. And then once I figured out, I had Professor Malloy, one of my sports management professors, was like, what do you do when you study for football? Because I hear your coaches talk about how hard you worked, how well prepared you are. And once he said that to me, it helped me bridge the gap of what are the skill sets that I have that made me successful with football, and to start to apply them into other areas of my life. And once I did that, school got a lot easier for me because I knew how to study. I knew what skills I was strong in, what skills I needed to continue to improve in. Mm-hmm. So for me, that was kind of the aha moment for me, was like, okay, what do I do with football in terms of my preparation? Let's try that with school. And it worked and made my life so much better. And the school didn't ask me to leave.
What so after you got your degree, like what was the the availability like the jobs?
Well, my plan was to give myself a couple years to make it in the NFL. But if not, I knew I always wanted to, at that point, my goal was to be an attorney and focus on corporate and sports law. Okay. That was the plan. And then I started really thinking about, is that really what I was passionate about? And one of the things that I looked at throughout my entire life, I've always helped other people and to learn and try to avoid some of the mistakes that I made, but also learn from some of the things that I did well. So for me, that was kind of the question, was like, if I become an attorney, am I going to have enough time to give back to young people like I want to at the level I want to? Yeah. And going through at Michigan, everyone was like, you would be great in education. And I heard that, and I immediately thought a high school teacher, and I was like, no, there's no way. So for me, it was kind of going back and thinking about, okay, maybe education is a good place to be, but not as a teacher. What are some of the other roles that you could possibly pursue? I knew I didn't want to be a principal of a high school, so for me, I just kept kind of doing some searching, and I ended up with counseling because it allowed me to kind of custom fit the areas and the population that I wanted to work with. So for me, change from preparing for the LSAT, which is the test you have to take to get into law school, to the GRE, so I could do the counseling. But it's a decision. I have no regrets. There's some moments when you're like,
That is the right thing, yeah. Sure, it's like no everything. So when you got into this field, was you wanting to stick with, say, football?
I did definitely want to work with football, but I also didn't want to work solely with football. I wanted to make sure that I had experiences working with other teams, so that way I could be well-rounded, because one of my career goals is to be director. Okay. So I felt like the more teams I could work with, the better it would make me as a director, and not just because I understood how football worked. Yeah. And the way I kind of describe it is, I love dogs, so it's like, even though you have multiple dogs, the breed is different, so you have to treat them differently. I have a Rottweiler, so I can play very aggressively with the Rottweiler, where my brother, he has a French Bulldog that's very small, and so I can't play as aggressive. Yeah. But they're both dogs, and that's how I look at the support for student athletes, is they're all dogs, but you have to really individualize the support for each team, because there's different cultures on the teams, there's different career paths that, you know, different teams want to have. Some teams, like college is as far as you can go. Other teams, you know, you can still get out and play professionally. So, you know, there's different, you know, aspirations there in terms of what's available after college. So for me, that's definitely one of the things I was aware of and wanted to make sure I worked with all the teams so I could be well-rounded. Mm-hmm.
So when you were coming up in this field, was there like a mentor you would like?
Yes, and
stick to. And
yes, and I still have them.
like they kind of pushed you to want to. I know you said like what you went through when you was a student athlete kind of made you want to like go into this field. Was there like a mentor that kind of like solidified it and like kind of definitely pushed you even more?
For me, it would probably be Elliot Daniels, who's now a senior associate athletic director at Michigan State. He was definitely that guy that helped me to see the career side of support for student athletes. So he was probably the first person that really got me thinking and pushed me, because he's a little bit older than me, but kind of had the same experience as a former student athlete himself. And, you know, one of the things that he told me as I was going through the program at Michigan State as an assistant counselor was that 9 out of 10 days he loved coming to work, and usually that 10th day he didn't want to be at work just because he was tired. And not many people can say that about their careers. And so for me, I'm like, that's a great percentage.
It is,
you know. And so for me, that was something that definitely caught my attention. And, you know, at that point, I was probably a couple months into doing my position as a assistant counselor, and I was really enjoying it because every day had some similarities, but every day was also different enough where you didn't get bored either.
Yeah.
So I could understand why he enjoyed coming to work. And then for me, at the end of that first year working at Michigan State, you see the growth of the student athletes that you work with, where they started and where they ended up at the end of that year. And that's definitely, like, to me, one of my favorite things about being in this field is seeing the young people that you work with grow and develop into being in a position to where you know they're going to be successful in life.
This one kind of rolls off the other one. Kind of like, how's like, is it like a like the average day here? You know, chasing after us. You know, all day. Is it like does it keep you busy all day?
Yes, it does. But for me, like, I like that because I don't know if how long I would have been able to be an attorney just sitting behind the computer typing away and you know, not really interacting with people as much. So for me, I like it because it helps the day go by. And like I said, for me, I get to really know you guys really well and get to see you guys in a light that I think a lot of people don't. So for me, I enjoy it. You know, there are definitely moments where it's like, come on, we've talked about this several times.
Oh yeah.
But, you know, like I said, for me though, those moments are so few, and the good moments definitely outweigh, you know, those moments of frustration. But even in those moments of frustration, I also ask myself this question: when you were their age, would you have gotten it right away too? And so for me, that always kind of helps bring me back to like, okay, yeah, we're having this conversation again, but at that age, you probably would have needed a couple of those conversations too. So, so that's how I kind of look at it. Yeah.
So how many schools have you worked with since you've been?
4. So I worked at Michigan State, University of Miami, Florida. I had the opportunity to go back and work at my alma mater at Michigan, and now down here at NC State, which is definitely nice because, you know, 2 of those schools were cold weather. So growing up in Michigan, it's cool as a kid to have those winters because you get snow days and days off. as an adult, you still got to go to work. You still got to clean the driveway, so it's not as fun. So moving down here, moving back south is a great career move.
That kind of answers the next one's like if you had to pick a favorite, which one? If you have a favorite to pick, which one?
Like Michigan's always going to be. I'm always going to be biased because I went to school there, played there, and graduated from there. But weather-wise, North Carolina, because I still get all the seasons. I loved working at Miami, Florida, but you had one season.
All year round.
All year round. And I almost missed my plane the first year I moved down there to come home for Thanksgiving because it's 80 degrees. And so I'm not thinking Thanksgiving because it's 80 degrees.
Yeah.
The leaves haven't changed color on the trees. And a couple of my students that I was working with women's track at the time were like, are you excited about going home to see your niece that you haven't seen yet? That was born a couple of months after I moved down to Miami. And I was like, yeah, but that's not for a little while. They're like, you're going home Thanksgiving, right? I'm like, yeah. They're like, dude, that's like in 2 days. So for me, that's why I'd say North Carolina is because I still get the seasons. And the winters here, like I learned last year, if it does snow, the city gets shut down. So I like that.
The whole city goes under.
Right.
So with where you are right now, I know you mentioned moving up. You want to be like next career is like you want to be like a director.
Mm-hmm.
Is that like the next step up above where you are now?
In a lot of ways, it can be. So I would say either a director or some schools. So it really depends on how the school's structured. Some places it would be director. Some places it would be senior associate director of academics and career development. So it just really depends on how that school is structured. But it would be one of those two titles or positions would kind of be the next step for me.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, has it been a challenge to get to where the position you're at right now?
Yeah, it has. And just that this is a field that a lot of times you're recognized if you make a mistake. And when you do the job well, the credit usually goes to the coaches. And so at times it is hard, and it's one of those things that it's taxing because you're working with a lot of different students, some that are really well prepared for college, some that are somewhere in the middle, and then some that like they're first generation and they have no clue what they just stepped into. So it's a lot of different pieces to the puzzle, and then you have a lot of different stakeholders in terms of the athletic department, the different units that the student athletes are in, and them really understanding, how best to support that student. So there's a lot of moving pieces, and at times you're siloed, so it can wear on you. So this is definitely a field where you're also not breaking the bank either. So you have a lot of people that, for several different reasons, get burnt out and leave the field. So for me, I've been very fortunate to do this 13 years now and still like have a passion to continue to do it. Yeah. And I know that's not always the case in this field because, like I said, it's easy to get burned out.
Sure. So say like when you were moving into this job field, was your mind, like how you mentioned, like moving up, eventually being like the director, like associate director, was that like the plan from the get-go, or like
yes,
or kind of?
Yes, but I think part of that too was I was really fortunate to have a number of really great mentors. Elliot Daniels, one of them, Dave Wyman down at Miami, Florida, and Roger Bell, Jim Pignatera at Michigan State, Kimya Massey, who's now at Oregon State, were people that I could always go and pick their brains and really learn from the career moves that they had made. And so one of the things that I kept hearing from those guys, especially early in my career, was to start your career from backwards. Think about your career from backwards to now. And what they were talking about is where do you eventually want to be? What's your end goal? And start working backwards, because that's going to be the path that's going to lead you to get there. You're going to think about your decisions very differently when you understand where you want to go. So with that in mind, you take different approaches to different professional development opportunities, different social opportunities. You're always mindful of those things, especially being a young professional. In a city like Miami, there's a lot of things that you can get out and be exposed to. But with that mindset of, this is where I want to be one day, I don't want to get to a position where someone's considering me for a position like that, and they're like, well, back when he was in Miami, he did boom, 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 boom. Yeah. So it helped me to really look at things in the big picture, and not just for the here and now moment. And I think a lot of times when people make poor decisions, it's because they only focus on the here and now, and not how can this decision affect me down the line.
Makes sense. So with this job, is this like a like the hours are set in stone, or do you have to kind of like work around, say, like the teams you have, like the athletes you have?
Definitely work around the teams. Okay. If you want to be good.
Okay.
And for me, that's something I knew going into it. And like I said, kind of like I talked about earlier, that's one of the reasons why some people do get out of this field, is because it's not a typical 9-to-5 job or 8-to-5 job. You're here on the weekends. There's travel. There's flexibility. You might come in and think that hey, I'm gonna be done at 4:30 today, and nope, something came up, and now you need to help a student, and the student needs to come back after practice. So now you're here at 7:30 at night working on an assignment, and it's at times where it's not because the student didn't prepare well. Sometimes some assignments just take a little bit longer than anticipated. So there's those type of things where you have to be very flexible, but once again, it's one of those things where it's never boring.
Always keeps you busy.
Yeah. So for me, that's the thing. Like, I knew what I was getting myself into in terms of the hours, that it wasn't going to be traditional 9-to-5. But I mean, for me, it's very rare, outside of knowing that you're going to work probably one day during the weekend. Most of the time you are pretty much 8-to-5 type of deal. Yeah. And usually when it's those nights where you do have to come back during the weekdays, it's usually because you're trying to get things done before a big road trip or something like that. So, like I said, it's not an everyday thing where you're doing 1,000 hours.
Last question: is there like any advice you would give, like, say, for me or anyone who's like looking to go into this field?
To me, it's one of those things that I always tell people to be aware of, that it's going to be a challenge, because you're competing between two different worlds, and you don't live in either one of them. And what I mean by that is you have to operate in the world of academics and deal with faculty and interact with academics, but then at the same time you also have to deal with athletics and the coaches and what are their desires, and they both have different competing desires. And so somehow you're in the middle of that, trying to do the best you can to balance those two worlds, and at the same time show these two worlds that the best for everybody is that we coexist, and that we can coexist very well together. So that's definitely one of the biggest challenges. And I think at this time, with all the different things that you hear about the NCAA, about student athletes' rights, I think it's a very unique time that we're going to see a lot of different legislation that changes, some of the rules regarding student athletes. Like, I wouldn't be surprised in the next couple of years if what's deemed full-time for a student athlete gets looked at based on, like, I think about seasons that are longer now. So when I started working at Michigan, men's basketball season started like the second or third week of October. Mm-hmm. Now it's the last week, I think, of September. So that's an additional 2.5, 3 weeks in the season. But you're seeing that across the field where also, and that was 10 years ago. So 10 years ago also, in the spring or summer, you only had men's and women's basketball that did second summer and football that did summer one. Yeah. That's all you would see, unless any other kid had eligibility issues for other teams, they would go home. Yeah. And now with coaches being allowed to work with their teams pretty much year round, especially in the summer, you have pretty much everyone here in one of those sessions, if not both of those sessions. So for me, one of the challenges that I think we're going to face is burnout, because student athletes no longer get, you at least used to get at least one semester in the summer off. Yeah. And now you don't. So for me, burnout, I think, is going to be one of the issues in the next couple of years that really takes a forefront in our field.
That's it.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Not a problem, man.